Section 1. Black Thursday into the killing cold. On October 14th, 1943, 291 B-17 flying fortresses clawed their way into a hard blue sky above England. The men of the 8th Air Force watched frost creep along the inside of their windshields as the bombers formed up, wingtip to wingtip, silver shapes turning east toward Germany. Schweinfurt again. A waist gunner muttered, breath frosting against his oxygen mask. Below them lay the English countryside. Ahead lay Schweinfurt and the ball-bearing works that fed the machinery of the Reich. 2 months earlier, the same target had devoured 36 fortresses. Empty bunks still marked the cost. At 25,000 feet, the temperature fell to 50 below zero. The B-17 was not pressurized. It was not heated. The aluminum skin conducted cold, as if the aircraft itself were a block of ice. Frost flowered along rivets. Metal surfaces burned bare skin on contact. The waist gunners stood at open windows. Twin 50 calibers braced against the slipstream. When enemy fighters approached on the beam, they leaned into a 200 mile per hour blast of Arctic wind. Wind chill calculations meant nothing up here. Flesh froze in under a minute. Each man wore an electrically heated flight suit light blue, nicknamed the Blue Bunny. Wires sewn through wool were meant to carry warmth from the bomber's electrical system. Plugged in? The tail gunner's voice crackled over the interphone. Plugged, came the reply. Supposed to. Midway across occupied Europe, one gunner felt the sudden absence of warmth. No gradual fade. 1 second heat. The next, nothing. Somewhere in the fabric, a wire had snapped. His hands stiffened. He flexed his fingers around the charging handle. Keep firing! The pilot barked as German fighters appeared, queuing in the distance like taxis at a stand. They came in waves, Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, pressing through the American formation. 60 bombers would fall that day. More than 100 returned torn open. Over 600 men were killed, wounded, or captured. History would name it Black Thursday. But even as German guns tore at aluminum and flesh, another enemy worked silently. In the 14 months ending December 1943, 1,634 airmen would be removed from flying status due to cold injury. Fewer 1,277 would be removed for wounds from enemy action. The cold was winning. The story begins years earlier, in drawing rooms and drafting tables in California, where engineers at Boeing envisioned a bomber that would fly higher than fighters could reach. Above 30,000 feet, anti-aircraft fire would falter. Enemy interceptors would choke on thin air. The fortress would reign above the storm. The theory was elegant. The reality was lethal. At altitude, the B-17 carried 10 men, scattered through an unheated tube of aluminum and plexiglass. Pilot and co-pilot forward. Bombardier and navigator in a glass nose. Engineer in the top turret. Radio operator midship. Waist gunners exposed at open ports. A ball turret gunner curled beneath the belly. A tail gunner alone in the far aft. The ball turret built by the Sperry Corporation was a 4-foot sphere, barely large enough for a small man folded in on himself. No room for a parachute. No room for extra clothing. Only guns, ammunition, and cold radiating from every surface. If the turret lost power, it could not rotate. If it jammed, the gunner was trapped. And if his heating suit failed, there was nowhere to go. They knew this. They stayed anyway. "Bandits low," the ball gunner would call, scanning the pale sky beneath the formation. Fingers numbed first, then hands, then forearms, like water rising in a basin. Flight surgeons sometimes cut gloves from frozen hands after landing, the flesh beneath white and hard. Some men lost fingers, some lost entire hands. The tail gunner suffered in isolation. If his oxygen failed, no one could reach him. If his suit died, he froze alone. In the summer of 1942, the first fortresses of the 8th Air Force arrived in England, determined to prove daylight bombing could break Germany's war machine. Instead, they discovered their own aircraft were maiming them. Colonel Malcolm C. Grow had seen war before. In 1915, he had volunteered with the Russian army on the Eastern Front. He had operated while artillery fell around him, earning the Order of St. George. He knew what battle did to flesh. Now, he studied frostbite reports, instead of shrapnel wounds, waist gunners with blackened fingertips, ball turret operators unable to feel their feet, tail gunners with ears frozen white. These men weren't hit? A staff officer asked. No, Grow answered quietly. They were cold. The heated F-1 suit, standardized in 1941, was meant to solve the problem. Manufactured by General Electric, it wired heating elements in series, like Christmas lights. Break one connection, and the entire system died. Testing had been done in the American Southwest. Careful movements, controlled conditions. No one had twisted violently, while a Focke-Wulf closed at 500 miles per hour. Up here, wires snapped constantly. A gunner would feel warmth vanish at 25,000 feet over Germany. He had minutes before frostbite began. In March 1943, an investigation revealed the truth. 3/4 of frostbite casualties tied to equipment failure came from heated garment malfunction. Grow placed the statistics on a general's desk. The cold is removing more men than the Luftwaffe, he said. The room fell silent. Wires in series, men in pieces.co, continue seamlessly from where this left off. The general removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. You're telling me, he said slowly, that temperature is costing us more crews than the Luftwaffe? Colonel Malcolm C. Grow did not raise his voice. Yes, sir. And it is preventable. Outside, fortresses were already warming engines for the next mission. In the waist positions, the physics was merciless. Air at -50 degrees, driven at 200 miles per hour, stripped heat from the body faster than any heating element could replace it. Wind blast accounted for nearly 40% of frostbite cases in 1943. By the next year, it would climb past half. The open waist windows had been designed for freedom of movement. A gunner needed space to swing twin 5.0 calibers across a wide arc. No one had asked what 200 miles per hour of Arctic wind would do to exposed flesh. During one raid over Bremen, a waist gun jammed mid-attack. Clear it! Clear it! The pilot shouted as tracers arced upward. The gunner grabbed the charging handle. His thick leather gloves slipped on frozen steel. The mechanism would not budge. He hesitated one heartbeat, then ripped off his gloves. Skin met metal chilled to 60 below zero. He cleared the jam. The gun roared again. The attacking fighter broke away, trailing smoke. When the fortress landed in England, a surgeon cut the glove from the man's hand. The skin beneath remained attached to the charging handle in thin, pale strips. Regulations later noted he had violated procedure by removing his gloves. The men called that paperwork bravery. They knew the truth. The choice was fingers or funerals. On the ground, Crew Chief Master Sergeant Earl Southwick of the 398th Bomb Group watched ambulances roll out after nearly every mission. He saw men carried off who had not been hit by flak. Frostbite, a medic would say. Southwick spat into the mud. From sitting in our own ship, he and his mechanics E.B. Best and Fred Whitman kept their B-17 flying no matter what came back through the English clouds. Engines shot out, hydraulics severed, control cables shredded, specifications dictated depot-level repair. Paperwork required approval from the states. Southwick ignored both. We fix it here, he said. Or, she doesn't fly. He improvised repairs that would have earned court-martial in peacetime. His aircraft never aborted a mission for mechanical failure. For that, he received the Bronze Star. But even ingenuity on the flight line could not rewire a heating suit sewn wrong from the factory. Grow pushed upward through the bureaucracy. The flaw was elementary. The F-1 suit wired its heating elements in series. One break, total failure. The solution lay in parallel wiring independent circuits. If one path failed, current would flow through the others. Partial heat, instead of none. He summoned engineers. Why was it built this way, he demanded. Easier to manufacture, one admitted. Groh's reply was cold as altitude. Easier than burying boys? By August 1943, the F-2 suit was standardized. It replaced the one-piece Blue Bunny with modular components, heated jacket and trousers, separate outer layers, wiring in parallel, stronger connections, replaceable sections. If one element failed, the rest would continue to warm. Without current, it protected to 32 degrees. With power, down to -30. Later variants would push to -60. It was not perfect, but it was progress bought in frozen flesh. Another problem demanded attention. Wind blast. No heating suit could overcome a direct Arctic gale. In July 1943, production began on the B-17G. When the model reached combat units that autumn, waist gun positions were enclosed in plexiglass panels. The guns mounted through flexible openings, allowing traverse without direct exposure. The difference was immediate. Men who had once leaned into a killing slipstream now fought in survivable cold. The G model also staggered the waist guns, giving each gunner room to move without tangling oxygen lines and power cords, another quiet contributor to heating failures. German pilots noticed. Attacks from the beam met steadier fire. Waist positions no longer faltered midway through engagements. Something had changed in the American formations. They did not know it was insulation. Groh's campaign widened. He commissioned lighter, flexible gloves designed for dexterity. Demonstrations proved jammed guns could be cleared without stripping protection. He developed fire-resistant face and neck guards as frostbite migrated from hands to exposed skin. He designed electrically heated casualty blankets for wounded men whose suits had to be cut away mid-flight. In July 1943, he received the Legion of Merit for developing lightweight body armor, overlapping steel plates capable of stopping low-velocity flak fragments, responsible for nearly 70% of wounds. The armor saved lives. But Groh measured success in frostbite statistics. By late 1943, the numbers began to shift. Hand injuries declined sharply. Fewer amputations. Shorter hospital stays. The cold had not vanished, but it was losing ground. Yet during that same year, the air war intensified. The 8th Air Force launched deep penetration raids into Germany without adequate escort. Long-range fighters capable of accompanying bombers all the way to targets had not yet arrived in force. Among the units paying dearly was the 100th Bomb Group, the Bloody 100th. Losses were so severe, other groups hesitated to fly near them. Lieutenant John Luckadoo flew with the 100th between June 1943 and February 1944. One of the few to complete his 25 required missions. Years later, he would distill every sortie into 4 words: fighters, flak, frostbite, fear. On one mission, his boot froze to a rudder pedal. "I had to land on my heels," he recalled. "Couldn't press the brakes. Temperature was 60 below. He survived. Many did not. In 1942 and 1943, a bomber crewman had roughly a 1 in 3 chance of finishing his tour. 2 of every 3 would be killed, captured, or maimed. More than 26,000 men of the 8th would die before the war ended. And in the early months, frostbite rivaled enemy fire as executioner. By early 1944, new suits and enclosed waist windows reached more squadrons. Training expanded. Crews were drilled in cold weather discipline. Gloves were no longer optional suggestions, they were survival tools designed to work. Gradually, frostbite cases fell below combat wounds. The shift was not dramatic. It did not make headlines, but it meant a gunner kept his hands. A pilot kept his crew intact. A veteran returned for another mission. The Luftwaffe still attacked. Flak still burst black in the sky. But the cold was no longer the most efficient German ally. Above Germany, at 25,000 feet, men still shivered. They simply no longer froze as often.